Recording has been started.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the monthly Distinguished Lecture Series for the Council for Strategic Affairs. My name is Dr. Adityanjee. Today is Sunday, July 13th, 2025. Council for Strategic Affairs arranges certain programs every month, a roundtable discussion, and a distinguished lecture every month. We also have a feature called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. We encourage strategic studies in general, and we encourage publication of articles on our website. We arrange conferences, symposia, meetings. We do have a fellowship training program in strategic studies. We are registered as a 501c3 non-profit organization with the IRS in United States. Those of our audience who are based in America, we encourage you to support the CSA by donating. You can also join our channel, YouTube channel. Usually these meetings are recorded and live stream, but today only we are going to record because there is some technical difficulty. Today's lecture is going to be delivered by Professor Seshadri Chari. Professor Seshadri Chari is a well-known thinker. He is a university professor. He is a journalist. He is a media personality, and he is an author. He will be talking about India-US bilateral free trade agreement. Where are we going? So I'm not going to spend much time on it. I'll just enumerate some guidelines to our audience. Please do not interrupt our esteemed speaker. Kindly put your cell phone on vibration mode. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves will be allowed to ask questions. Questions are moderated through the chat room. Please send very brief and precise questions. Please don't send lengthy monologues in the form of a question or comment. And again, this meeting is being recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel within next few hours. Usually we live stream on YouTube, but my apologies, today there are some technical difficulties. And I would encourage our viewers from North America to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as support and donate. You can go to the website and click on the donation page. Without further ado, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to invite Professor Chari to take up the platform. This is not the first time he has come on our platform. He has been on our platform before. So welcome to you, sir. Kindly go ahead.
Thank you, Adityanjee. Thank you, Adityanjee. It's always a pleasure to connect with you and your very big group. You have a very, very large group. As you said, some technical issues. I am right now in Mumbai. We have a series of Mumbai University meetings. And we are also working on a number of other verticals regarding, of course, this bilateral trade, as well as other economic issues pertaining to the Reserve Bank issues. So we are into the thick of everything. So in between, if some, if there is a problem issue with voiceover or something, you can call me on my mobile and inform me. So as you very rightly said, this FTA actually, India is approaching this entire issue of FTA from a very different perspective. There are a number of issues why we should be actually working on FTAs, and a number of reasons also. So, what has happened is in the recent years, especially in the last 5-6 years, we are trying to develop some some meaning to what we do, actually, as far as FTA is concerned. Because the geoeconomics and geopolitics both are very dynamic issues, they are subject to change. So, in the changed perspective, we we are now narrowing down all our FTAs on four verticals. The most important vertical, of course, is the vertical of developed countries. So we want to do FTA with developed countries. So we want to do FTA with UK, we want to do FTA with US, we want to do FTA with the European Union, with Germany, and these are some of the areas where we are looking at. Second is, we all know about the race for rare earth and minerals. So every technology is now being linked to some form of rare earth or some form of mineral. So the next vertical, as far as FTA is concerned, should be those nations which are rich in minerals. Of course, we know that we are too late in this. China has already bet both US and India to this. Some of the most developed countries are now lagging behind China as far as rare earth and mineral wealth is concerned, as far as Africa is concerned. So many other countries. So that is another issue. The third vertical that we are looking at is to do FTA and trade deals with developing economies. There was a time when the whole world was divided into north and south. North meaning the developed economies, south meaning the third world, underdeveloped countries, developing countries. But now those things have gone. India is the fourth largest economy in the world. So there is nothing called north south anymore. The division has gone. And not all the north countries are developed economies. So there are a very large sector of developing economies. If you look at it only from the geoeconomics point of view, from the geopolitical point of view, these are middle powers. So of course we will not go into the details of middle power, but the developing economies is a very huge market that we are looking at. And the fourth set of FTAs will be within the region, immediate neighbors, of course, excluding Pakistan, and some other countries. We had given MFN status to Pakistan, most favored nation status to Pakistan, but Pakistan did not reciprocate, and we know the issues as vis-a-vis Pakistan, so I'm not going into those details also as of now. The biggest problem that Pakistan was facing vis-a-vis India in giving most favored nation status is they immediately translate the most favored nation status to Urdu. In Urdu, they have to say, Sabse Pasandida Mulk. So they had a huge problem. How can we call India the Sabse Pasandida Mulk? They are our enemies. So that was one big reason why they did not give MFN status to India at all. Anyway, the humor part of it apart, that MFN status has been withdrawn. So barring Pakistan, we have Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and also certain regional forums like BIMSTEC, for example. IPSA is another forum that we are working on. BRICS is another forum that we are working on. So India neighbors and other neighboring institutions, trade institutions. So these are the four verticals that we are working. Developed countries, rich nations which are rich in minerals and rare earth, developing countries, and India and the regional countries. So if you see these verticals, what we see is that India has something like 13 regional trade agreements, what we call the RTAs, and free trade agreements, FTAs, the RTAs and FTAs put together. So out of this, we have what we call an RTA with ASEAN, which is India ASEAN FTA, India Singapore CACA, India Malaysia Comprehensive Economic Agreement, and India Thailand FTA. And the Thailand FTA also includes what we call the Early Harvest Scheme, EHS. So this ASEAN RTA itself is something like the 2011 figures was 34.5 crore, 5 billion export. 2021 is 40.6 billion export. So this regional issues give us a lot of advantage as far as um, uh, trade is concerned. So out of these 13 regional trade agreements, which I just told, ASEAN becomes one of the largest. Then we have got what we call India-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. There again, we have been able to do 6.1 billion worth of business. With South Korea, we have got what we call India-South Korea SEPA, which was signed in 2010, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. But that has been lagging behind a little bit. But now, in the last 4 years, we have caught up with South Korea in a big way. South Korea was not very happy with India's economic development, but now in the last 2 years, we have had about 4 rounds of talks with South Korean government, and now they are very eager to set up shipbuilding industry in India and take it forward, take the SEPA to the next level. Then we have got what we call the SAFTA. Agreement on SAFTA is one thing. India-Sri Lanka FTA is another thing. India-Nepal Treaty of 1950 treaty, trade is another thing. And India-Bhutan Agreement on trade, commerce, transit and other things. In fact, more than South Korea, it is the SAFTA which has given us something like 31.6 billion worth of exports. And then we have got with Mauritius what we call India-Mauritius Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Partnership Agreement. And we have got with the United Arab Emirates, the India-UAE SEPA. And with Australia, we have got India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. So these are all some of the things that we are working on. So in addition to this, we have what we call 6 preferential trade agreements also, what is called the PTAs, including Indo-Pacific Trade Agreement, what was formerly called the Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement. Of course, the name of the agreement still stands as Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement, but it is now called Indo-Pacific Trade Agreement. All these RTAs have very robust exit clauses. We have got very good agreement with all these people, and any participating state can look into reshaping all these things. So these are some of the trade deals that India has already done. Why I am going into the background is that if you go through the media, it appears as if India is signing a trade agreement with the US for the first time in the world, as if India has done nothing as far as trade is concerned. India has been a very, very active participant as far as global trade is concerned, and we have worked with some of the countries with very strong fundamentals. So that is where we have to actually look at the issue as far as India's trade is concerned. Now, even recently, if you see, even as we are talking about India US FTA, US has also done certain trade deals very recently. For example, US President Donald Trump announced on social media that the US and China have what you call restored a truce. That is what he has used. Restored a truce last month, following 2 days of intensive trade talks in London. And the deal is done, quote unquote. So, but it also says pending final approval from both the leaders. So, this is one thing. I'll come back to why I'm saying this a little bit later. So, but mark these 2 words, declaring the trade deal done, pending final approval. These are the 2 important words. So, and then he further says full magnets and any necessary rare earth will be supplied upfront by China. Likewise, we will provide to China what was agreed to, including Chinese students using our college and universities. Anyway, I don't see why a trade deal should mention something about university and college, but that is a different story. And then it is also included that US tariff would be set at 55% on Chinese goods. That is up from 30%, actually, if you see, while China's tariff remain at 10%. So it is 55% versus 10%. This is another area where we have to look at the trade deal mm, with fingers crossed. And then it also talks about a baseline 10% reciprocal trade tariff on imports from nearly all US trading partners. And then that 10% as far as China is concerned is 20%. And then these are some of the issues. I'm not going into all those details. I'll tell you why these details become important. Then again, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that is ASEAN, they have unveiled a comprehensive 5-year strategic plan uh, during the very recent meeting in Malaysia, and they are aiming to transform the 10-member bloc into what they have called as world's fourth largest economy by 2045. This is another trade deal that has taken place in the last almost a month, since the time India-US FTA talks began. Now, the third is China has also independently announced that it will eliminate all tariffs on imports from 53 African countries. So it has diplomatic relations with all these 53 countries. So this is with the aim to boost trade from African countries, African exporters, and then give them border access to Chinese markets. So this is, mark the words, eliminate all tariffs on imports from 53 African countries. This is China's independent trade deal, even as India-US FTA talks are going on. Then again, US and UK, they have said last Monday, they have said that they have finalized trade agreements. It was negotiations were going on for more than a month. Now, this trade agreement between US and UK, they have said that we have lowered tariffs on certain British goods like cars, aerospace equipment, and steel and aluminium. Let us come back to these issues later. When I come to the US problems, I'll refer to this again. And then Indonesia and Singapore have also signed a landmark deal to trade low carbon electricity and then collaborate on carbon capture and storage and develop green industrial zones. This they are aiming at about 10 billion in investment and 3.4 gigawatts of power exports by 2035. Another 10 years, it will be 3.4. This is India Singapore. So even as India and US are talking about trade, FTA, all these trade agreements have taken place in the last 1 month. And if you see, all these trade agreements have taken place after a negotiation of, say, 1 week to 1 month. So, what happens? Is trade only about tariff? India and the US are discussing or negotiating for such a long time. So, why should trade agreements take such a long time to conclude? A. B. Can you really conclude a trade agreement in 1 week and then say that the deal is done? Can you say that? What are the rules and regulations that go into all kinds of trade agreements? We all know about the 10 years of discussion it took place as far as the negotiations, and then that led to the General Agreement on Trade in Services, that is GATS, as part of the Uruguay round of talks. And then after that, it again went to WTO members, the role of services in this, and then investment, people flows. All these issues were discussed for 10 years. Then we came up with what we call the GATT regulations. And then the Uruguay round actually resulted in the in what we call the third outcome, and then it went on to an agreement on trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, that is the TRIPS agreements. So the TRIPS agreements was the next step, in which that again took something like 5 years to come to a conclusion. And then it went on to Doha round of development agenda that was launched in 2001, and 2004 it was concluded. Now look at this. We have spent something like 20 years in finalizing the template for GATS, TRIPS and TRIMS. So when you are discussing trade agreements, what are the things that go into a trade agreement? It's a long list. That is like something like trade in goods, including trade in remedies, safeguards, anti-dumping measures, countervailing duties, custom procedures, rules of origin rules, technical barriers that are part of the trade, and then sanitary and psychosanitary measures, electronic and commerce, that is e-commerce. How are you going to deal with e-commerce? And then trade in services. What are the terms and conditions for trade in services? Then trade in financial services, trade in telecommunication services, investment rules. FTA also requires investment rules. You have to discuss the various nuances of investment rules. Then movement of persons, then intellectual property, and then competition policy, government procurement, transparent administration, rules, regulations. All these factors go into the formation of an FTA. So what I'm thinking is, has all these formalities been completed between US and China in 1 week? Has all these formalities been completed between US and UK in 10 days? If you go to Article 25 of GATT agreement, that itself is something like 350 pages. Go through that. And then in order to finalize the FTA, we have what we call the organized system. That the usual basis for negotiation of tariff elimination is the organized commodity description and coding system, and what we call the HS code. Has China and US discussed all HS codes? Have they come out with a common HS code book? Does it comply with Article 25 of GATT? And if there is a dispute in that, where will both of them go? How will they treat? I mean, I don't understand when President Donald Trump says that I have signed a deal with China. Who are the people who are talking about the deal? Who are those people who are going through all these issues? I don't know. I mean, maybe they have been discussing it for a long time, but we are not going into that. So why I am mentioning this is that India USA trade FTA has to go through this process. This is the filter. This it has to go through this filter, and you cannot say that 9th July is the target that I have decided. So before 9th July, whatever you want to do, you do. Trade deals are not done like this. Trade deals have to be done according to certain set procedures and rules. For example, if you are talking about tariff, and if you have to do with tariff, what kind of tariffs are you going to use? I mean, is it going to be bound tariff or is it going to be free tariff? So these are all some of the issues that we have to say. I mean, what we call the tariff rate inscribed in the tariff schedule lodged with WTO. Every country has lodged its own tariff schedule with the WTO. So are we going to go according to those bound tariffs? It is called bound tariff. And the other tariff which we are talking about is called what is the applied tariffs. So every country applies a certain tariff, and then we say that we go according to applied tariff. Now sometimes bound tariff would often suggest, I mean, bound tariff will probably result in massive reduction in tariffs. But if you compare that reduced tariff to applied tariff, the applied tariff may be zero. So you have to go from HS code to products, and so many things go into this. So when we come to the objectives of what we say the India US FTA, what are the objectives? Why India and US should sign an FTA at all? Why should they do it? Of course, the overarching objective that both countries have fixed is that by 2030, our trade volume should go to $500 billion. From 120, it should go to $500 billion. So it's a massive, what you call, target that we are setting up. And if you see the objective, that is the US India established terms of reference, the TOR on bilateral trade agreement. The TOR says that we have to finally we have to do everything. We have to set our goals and initiatives so that we drive the transformative change across key pillars of cooperation and commit to results driven agenda with initial outcomes this year to demonstrate the level of trust for mutually beneficial partnership. Now, are we really going to achieve some kind of trust and a mutually beneficial partnership, especially at a time when there is so much of mistrust between India and US? For example, very recently President Trump has said that if we are part of BRICS, we will levy an additional 10% tariff on you. So what does it mean? Given a choice to choose between US and BRICS, do you deal with country in this manner? Suppose the India says that, look, between if you have to agree, if you have to choose between US and BRICS, probably you'll choose BRICS. What happens? So trade deals are very compact discussions. So you cannot actually lay conditions and lay down certain mines, and then you ask India to walk through the minefield. And if you get blown up, oh, sorry, buddy, we are very sorry. That is not the way we deal with trade deals. Another issue that we have to look into is the US total goods in trade with India was estimated at something like 130 billion in by 2024, but we have not yet achieved it. Of course, as Trump correctly said, the average applied trade. Now, this is not bound trade. This is applied trade. Applied trade is 17%. India's applied trade is 17%, whereas US average applied trade is 3.3%. So from 17%, we have to go to 3.3% or zero. India would really prefer zero tariff as a reciprocal process. That's what we have said. But India's average applied trade on agricultural product is 39%, while US average applied trade on agricultural product is just 5%. So agriculture is one issue which is going to be of a great issue between both the countries. I'll come to agriculture briefly at the end of this whole issue. And in between, like India has got 13 FTAs, the US has also got several FTAs. For example, US has got what we call, US has a large market. The biggest trading partner of USA, incidentally, is Mexico, then Canada, then China. Not China first. Then Germany, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, UK. India comes 10th. Whereas, as far as India is concerned, China is first, US is second. So, how are we going to circumvent this problem? How are we going to shift our focus from China to US? What are the advantages that China is giving to India, and what are the advantages that US will be giving to India? Is another issue that we have to seriously consider and talk. And if you see the USA's free trade agreement partner countries, they have all are providing very great market access through reduced or eliminated tariff to the US, like intellectual property protection, elimination of non-tariff barriers, and then this assessing FTA markets gives a lot of advantage as far as US is concerned. US also has got 14 FTAs with 20 countries, which comprise of about 40% of US goods export. So 14 FTAs with 20 countries. If the moment India US FTA comes into force, it will be the 15th FTA and the 21st country. And US already has what you call FTA with Australia, Bahrain, Chile, and even formerly what was called NAFTA is now become USMCA. That is United States, Canada, Mexico. So this NAFTA is also in this thing. Whereas India's total exports during financial year 24-25 was estimated as to 820 billion US dollars. There is a positive growth of 5.50%. Now, $820.93 billion of exports without FTA with US. We have to remember this. And then as far as merchandise exports during March 25 is concerned, it is 41.97 billions as compared to 41.69 in March. There is a marginal um, decrease here. So we have to see how it is working out. So when we are talking about these two figures, India's total exports and India's merchandise imports, when you are talking about this, we have to underline what are the areas as to why we should sign FTA with US. The first and the foremost is the elimination of tariffs. Now, elimination of tariff is a bilateral issue. You cannot say that I eliminate all my tariff and I subject my economy to all kinds of tariffs that you are going to levy on me, including the 10% tariff for being a member of BRICS. Can any FTA sustain this kind of conditional procedures? It cannot. Second is, we have to determine the rules of origin framework. So that is another area where we are working on. So it takes time as far as rules of origin issue is concerned, because basically rules of origin means it defines the goods that will always be considered as originating in the other party or party's country, and therefore eligible for preferential tariff treatment. So these are goods that are wholly obtained, produced, and substantially transformed uh, in a particular country. So, but when you come to US, remember the total manufacturing capability of US is reduced in the last 2 to 3 decades, rather 4 decades, substantially. Whereas India's manufacturing capabilities have increased in the last 1 year, and the kind of FTAs that India has got, it involves what we call a manufacturing link. So a value chain system has been built by India. So determining rules of origin framework it's going to be a very tough task as far as India and US is concerned. So this has to be taken into consideration, and the delay is going to be enormous in this because we have to link it with HS code. Okay. The third item on India-US FTA is going to be what we call the anti-dumping mechanisms and safeguards. And then after you decide these three important factors, you will come to something like working on 500 billion trade partnership by 2030. We are in 2025. So it's going to be another 5 years in which you have to what you call do this kind of a circus. Now we are in a multipolar world. Whether US agrees or not, the US has to first recognize the ground realities of multipolarity. And with more than 13 FTAs and another half a dozen new ones in the pipeline, especially with EU, UK, and India has to diversify its markets. So when you diversify your markets, can you really uh, brush the multipolarity under the carpet and look at a bilateral trade with the US only on the basis of what suits US? Can we do this? Can India really circumvent the multipolarity as far as trade is concerned? That is another problem. So this failure to recognize that all the FTA partners with India are equal partners. So US will also have to learn that if you are signing an FTA with India, you will have to treat India as a equal partner. It cannot be a one-sided relationship where India will have to compromise with its sovereignty, but US will keep on pressurizing India on certain rules and regulations. It cannot be. So it has to be on the basis of equal partnership. So this kind of holier than thou attitude, high-handedness, and my way or highway. If you are not with us, you are not. If you are against us, I mean, if you are not with us, you are against us. That kind of attitude cannot go. Another thing is 10% additional tariff. This BRICS issue will have to be sorted out. It will become a very big thorn in the negotiations in the future. Third factor that US should recognize is that its manufacturing sector has gone down, and as far as it will have to outperform in the next 5 years, 25 to 30. If you want to do $500 billion worth of trade with India, you have to outperform China, South Korea, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, Germany. Can US do this in 5 years? As far as even simple, take one item like automobiles is concerned, US will have to beat China, India, Japan, Germany, and South Korea hollow. Can US do it in 5 years? That's a very big question that US negotiators will have to ask themselves. And India has also got certain problems. So more importantly, there are two issues that India is facing. One is the non-tariff barriers issue as far as India is concerned. So we have set what we call the quality control orders, QCO. So the QCO, what happens is the US has already raised this concern over what is called India's growing and burdensome import quality rules. The 700 QCOs are part of the self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat idea. So we need these QCOs to make Atmanirbhar Bharat a success. But if you remove these QCOs totally, then our Atmanirbhar Bharat idea goes in for a toss. Can we do this? Can we? India will have require some time to balance between this Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliant India push, and the removal of QCOs or reducing it. So we don't want to flood our market with low quality import and ruin the growing investments that we are making in self-reliant India push. So this is one thing that we have to worry as far as India is concerned. Another major problem that India is facing is on agriculture farm sector. Washington has been actually pressurizing India for opening up the farm sector, massive access to farm sector, and then all kinds of US companies, including GM crop, genetically motivated crops, everything you should allow totally free access to every US company as far as farm sector is concerned. Now, India's farm sector is a heavily protected farm sector. Can we? I mean, it's a political issue. It is an economic issue. It is an issue of agricultural security, food security issue. Can we really do this without getting into the details of what happens? What are the consequences? So, as far as farm sector is concerned, it is going to be a strict no as far as FTA is concerned. So this farm sector issue and QCOs, these are the two issues that India is going to face as far as the FTA is concerned. So how the negotiators are going to maneuver their way out of this is what we have to see. And the third and the most important issue that India is now facing is the India manufacturing sector also. Actually, India's core sector, especially like steel, cement, metal refining, mining, infrastructure building, they are all, I'm sorry to say, some of the Indians who might be listening to this may feel bad about it. But some of the biggest companies of India, steel companies, cement companies, metal refining companies, are stuck in 1950s and 60s and 70s machine and techniques. We are using human beings in boilers. We are using human beings in furnace which has got 1245 degrees centigrade. We are still using human beings. Why can't we go for automation? Why can't we robotic automation of these places? And we look into shutdown of factories for 10 days in 6 months. Look at the kind of energy loss that we are getting into. So this is one area where India has to pull up the socks and work seriously, which we have to do ourselves. But pending all these things, I think the on a positive note, if I have to end my presentation on a positive note, I think India is very serious about the FTA with US, and there will be initially hiccups. We know for sure that the tariff issue is not going to be very simple. It will have to be handled very, very positively. But in spite of that, we will 100% be able to successfully enter into this kind of a FTA, which is going to benefit the democratic world. And we will really be able to provide a strong fundamental for the economic turnover of in the coming days, say next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. By 2047, India is going to be in a very different kind of a situation, and that US India FTA will help. So there are problems, there are hiccups, there are teething problems, there are issues of ego, there are issues of negotiation, there are certain sensitive issues that we cannot speak publicly. Farm issue is very important, but in spite of that, I think our tenacity is still very alive and we are not impulsive. India will finally uh, forge an excellent FTA with USA and both countries will benefit. That's what I feel. Thank you, Adityanjee. I'm open for any corrections if I have made some mistakes in my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Chari, for very detailed and very educational lecture, elucidating the background issues that sometimes are set aside. Uh, we have a couple of questions in the chat room, but before I go to that, I just want to highlight here that the deal that has been signed with China is not an FTA, it's just an interim deal. It's an interim trade deal while details are being worked out. So the idea is to get the credit for a quick deal and make the announcement, because previous stance of the US administration was that we are going to sign 90 deals in 90 days till July 9th, and that did not happen. So some positive face has to be put up. So yes, US has a FTA with UK and possibly Vietnam, and some kind of interim trade deal with China, which is basically not making political shots at each country and let trade continue. So I just wanted to highlight that before I go on to the chat room and start reading questions from our audience members. So first question is here from Dr. Vineet Singh, who is a psychiatrist based in Canada and who has recently joined our CSA executive team. And he's asking how much of our ongoing challenges of trade war, which obviously the whole world is experiencing, will affect India's growth trajectory.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. Absolutely fantastic question. I'm not truly somebody speaking. Yeah, I'm not truly qualified to answer this question in such a short time. But yes, if you see the issue of trade war, essentially is between US and China. I'm sorry, but it's not going to limit itself between US and China. US and China are two very major economies. So if these two economies are going to sort of deal with one another on war footing.
Admin, please mute Ranjit Rai. Admin, please mute Ranjit Rai.
Sorry.
I'll do that. One moment.
Done?
Okay. Professor Chari,
Yeah.
you may continue, please.
Yeah. So this trade war actually, the initial apprehensions about trade war has come down a little bit. Now, if China and US are going to have a uh, larger trade agreement, I think it will be in the interest of all the countries. But yes, trade wars are going to affect all economies. It's going to affect the emerging economies even more. But remember one thing, trade wars are not going to affect only the emerging economies. Trade war has already started affecting China. So it's not good in the final analysis. It's not going to be good for the US also. So I think it's going to be a huge catastrophe if US and China go on a war footing as far as trade is concerned. So I think both the countries will rework it. Thank you.
Next question is from Mr. Vijay Nilekani, and he is also a member of our executive team. He focuses on energy issues, domain expertise, and he's asking, India is playing by the rules of cricket. The current US administration is playing by the rules of a violent contact sport like rugby. It doesn't look good. What do you think? It's a very interesting question.
Yeah, truly interesting. I don't know. I'm not a great fan of cricket, nor I know anything about rugby. And my age does not permit me to even look at rugby, the kind of violent rugby that comes across. But suffice to say, what you're saying is very correct. Your analogy is absolutely fantastic. Every deal, trade deal especially, has to be on the parameters of certain rules and regulations. So you cannot in the first place put conditions. So we sign a trade deal provided 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 conditions are met. The moment you put conditions, it is not negotiations. It is like either we accept the conditions or not accept the conditions. So negotiation, at the time of negotiations, these can be brought up. These issues can be, generally what they do is they bring up these issues and then offer certain time limit for solutions. So when we have something called protection for farm sector, let us say, India has a history of protection for farm sector. So from PL 480, we have seen some of the worst kind of days to white revolution and green revolution. So we have to look into all these factors before we ink a particular deal. A. B. India is a democracy. We are not an autocratic country or a one party rule where we can do anything that we want. So we have to get into the democratic mode. We have to take all these FTAs into the parliament. We have to discuss with the parliament. We have to talk to the opposition. We have to listen to their objections. We have to talk to the stakeholders. Farmers are biggest stakeholders. So we have to do all these things. Third factor is defense production. India has protected its defense production for a long time, but now we have allowed indigenization of defense production. Now, when you come to indigenization of defense production, and then suddenly, if you want a relaxation on quality control or wind up make in India process, what happens? Can we really afford to open up our defense production to a foreign company which is dealing with India and Pakistan both at the same time, which is dealing with India and China at the same time, which is dealing with India and Turkey at the same time? Can we do this? Practical. My one single monosyllable answer is no. But you cannot put this as a condition before you talk. During the negotiations, you have to raise these issues and listen to the other side. This is how negotiations take place, and we have negotiated from WTO onwards. So we have gone through this process. So I wish the American side also understands these issues. Thank you.
There's another question, which is again very interesting question. So I'm going to read it for you, sir. Do you anticipate a complete overhaul of most deals reached in next 2 to 3 years after current US administration leaves? Hopefully in 3.5 years when quote unquote normalcy returns to US ecosystem.
No, this is a left-handed compliment to the present regime. I don't think it would be very wrong to say that it's an abnormal situation. Well, of course, we have problems, no doubt about it. When it comes to a presidential form of government, when President of US has enormous powers, and he is used to dealing from a position of strength. But the US negotiators should understand that US cannot always deal from a position of strength, and especially in a multipolar world where the supremacy of the dollar is being challenged. And remember, the one country which has stood against changeover to de-dollarization is India. Even in BRICS meeting, India has openly said that de-dollarization is not the solution to the current problems of trade settlement issues. Anyway, that's a different issue. So we have to understand that every country has to deal with bilateral uh, trade agreements, multilateral trade agreements, and also multilateral trade organizations and institutions, right from WTO to NAFTA. We have to deal with all these things. And even US itself has practically erased, obliterated some of the um, Atlanticism was on two fronts. One was the Atlanticism on economics and Atlanticism on defense. So the economic Atlanticism is totally gone. What remains is only the defense Atlanticism, that is in the form of NATO. But that is also being slowly diluted. So what is going to happen to NATO after 3 or 4 years, we don't know. In such a situation, US will have to be even more careful in dealing with democracies, especially emerging democracies, especially the fourth largest economy of the world, that is India. So I don't think India will either run down or change or amend. Once an FTA is signed, it's a sovereign deal between two countries. It is not between two individuals. So we will still be able to manage that, maintain it, Trump or no Trump. It will continue, and probably if US understands the next dispensation, let us say, understands India's position better, probably the trade will smoothly take place. India wants to do trade with USA. We want a good FTA, and we have absolutely no problem either with this dispensation or any future dispensation. We have no problem.
Uh, Before I go to the next issue, I just want to point out a few things that you alluded to, and one was PL 480.
Hmm.
Now, we are not talking about trade in agriculture, but
Hmm.
agricultural aid during those times. And those
Hmm.
of us who have not died here like me remember what was the quality of wheat supplied by US to India under PL 480. It used to be called
Hmm.
red wheat,
Hmm.
and it was mixed with insecticides, pellets, dirt,
Hmm.
and it was attributed to origin from Mexico, and it was called Mexican wheat, and there was actually popular resentment. So when you talk
Hmm.
about quality control and total access to US agricultural products, quality is very, very important from historical experience, although that was not
Hmm.
part of trade, that was a, an aid, agricultural aid from a superpower to a fledgling economy at that point in time. So people should
Hmm.
jog their memories. Second thing that has not been really mentioned by Professor Chari, when we talk about
Hmm.
agricultural sector, so there's farm sector and then there's dairy sector.
Hmm.
Now the dairy practices in US are totally an anathema to Indian consumer. How
Hmm.
many of the Indian consumers would like dairy products from cattle that
Hmm.
have been fed intestines of dead cattle? Because the
Hmm.
way the cattle feed is manufactured in India, in US, is not based on plant-based products.
Products.
Uses the waste from the meat industry, from the beef industry, and that waste is recirculated as cattle feed. And this has led to situations like bovine spongiform encephalopathy in UK, where they had actually infected their entire cattle herd. So Indian reticence is based both on scientific grounds as well as on cultural grounds, and all the participants will understand that, and the negotiators should understand that. So I wanted to make those two comments that had not been brought about. Now there's a question from Dr. Raj D. Patel. What is the status of exporting natural gas to India? Is US open to exporting emerging civilian nuclear technology like SMR, MMR? Is US open to collaborate with India in unconventional energy space such as OTEC?
Yeah, certainly. Trade agreements cannot take into consideration all these factors because some of these items do not come under trade. There are what they call the strategic agreements. So we already have, as far as military technology is concerned, as far as communication technologies are concerned, India and US have got a very robust understandings and adjustments. So we work together on a number of such issues. And there are other platforms also, like Quad, where we work together on maritime issues. There are other platforms like Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So IPEF also is one platform where we are working on other fundamentals. So these are all some of the areas where we are able to work together with the US on military, outer space technologies, maritime technologies, both the naval technology and other issues. So these things may not actually form part of the overall trade agreement, but these, whether we conclude the trade agreement or not is a different issue. But these agreements, which we have already signed with the US, will keep going, and they have been very useful to both the countries. So this will go. And as far as oil is concerned, I think US is more importantly focused on exporting the shale gas. So India is also looking into that, and India is energy starved, so we need energy, and we are now focusing from 2% of our energy, which comes from nuclear energy, to 20% we have to go. And we are now working on the third cycle, which is essentially the use of molten salt technology using thorium as a fuel. So we are working on it. So once we are able to do that, we will be able to be a little more self-sufficient as far as energy sources are concerned. So we are working on that also. And nuclear technology is one technology. We have already signed an agreement with the US, what is called as India-US nuclear deal, which was signed in 2009 by Dr. Manmohan Singh government, and we are working on it. But unfortunately, the kind of involvement that the US companies are supposed to have in India have not taken place because of certain rules and regulations that we have to go through. In the interest of India's own national interest, we have to go through all these things. So those things have been discussed. In fact, they are under being discussed now.
I do have Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary to Government of India, amongst the audience. So before trying to end this session, maybe I would invite Ambassador Shashank to give any comments if he chooses to do so. Ambassador Shashank, sir.
Well, I've unmuted. I'm so happy to hear Professor Seshadri Chari is an old friend of mine, and
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
happy that he is also involved in studying all the complications of working out trade agreements and commodities, investments, movements of professionals, investment, and the insurance, etc. But of course, with the United States, we have to keep in mind, as you said, or somebody said, that it's a question of our knowing cricket and the Americans knowing rugby. So we have to get used to the new style, keeping in mind that we have to reach the target of $500 billion. Now, how do we reach it? Yes, there are going to be a lot of issues on both sides, but we must keep this in mind that this has been of great interest. Our partnership has been of great interest in the past, and we should really go about it in the long-term interest of world security and peace. I would not be able to go into the specific issue, which Professor Chari has done with great merit, but I would still say that, yes, there are difficulties. We have our sensitivities, and US has its sensitivities, but we have to just see how best we can go into those areas where we can work together. Not necessary to go into only those areas where one side is very keen to open the markets of the others, but the other is not possible, whether political reasons or whatever. They are not able to do that. So I think that's what I would say. It's not a very easy task, and I have great regard and confidence in our leadership as well as our trade negotiators that they would be able to work it out nicely. Only thing I would say that whatever we have done in the past should also not be decried. I think that is something which Professor Chari has also mentioned. He has repeatedly talked about the agreements which have been reached in the past. We should try to overcome, if there are difficulties, we should try to overcome the weaknesses of the previous agreements. I'm quite sure that with goodwill on sides, whether with the ASEAN or with Northeast Asia, etc., we should be able to work on them because our goal is the same. We want a peaceful Asia. We want an Asia where we can all work together under a rule-bound system. So therefore, we have to keep that in mind and not think that it's only with UK, USA, or Europe we will be able to achieve everything, because they have their long-term demands on India, and they are not going to go away. So therefore, we should not say that, all right, we should forget about the past and go and do for the future. It will not work out. And we have, of course, Africa, we have worked very hard. We should try to now work with Latin America, where we have taken interest. And I think hopefully that will create a kind of a network and a web of relationships whereby USA will find it in great interest to work with us in Latin America and Africa, so that it will not be seen as a direct confrontation like with China, but with a friendly relationship. I think UK has agreed to do that, EU has agreed to do that, and USA should also try to do that. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Shashank, for your pearls of wisdom, diplomatic wisdom. And we have run out of time. Actually, we are above our timeline, so I'm not going to take any more questions. My heartfelt thanks and gratitude to Professor Seshadri Chari for a very scholarly, very erudite lecture on this burning topic. And yes, it will take time, but it is going to be a win-win situation as and when this bilateral FTA is negotiated. I think both sides will learn from the difficulties, but both sides should actually be a little bit more flexible, understanding each other's sensitivities. My thanks to all our audience members who are, sacrificing 1 hour of their Sunday time, Sunday morning here in US and evening in India. This is not a very welcome time to join a webinar on trade issues. So thank you, our audience members. Really appreciate your participation, your questions. And lastly, I must thank Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori and Mr. Rajiv Verma, who make these things possible by working in the background. Heartfelt thanks to them. And again, very thankful to Professor Seshadri Chari for taking the time off. And with that comment, I will be ending this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Namaskar.